The Time-Travelling Cat and the Egyptian Goddess. Chapter 10. Where have you been? His dad was angry. Topher had never seen him so angry. Miss Crab had rung him at work. She'd tried home first. Was Topher ill? She'd said. How long was he going to be ill? They needed him for the special school assembly the next day. I felt a fool. I said you were fine and that you were at school. She said you weren't. I was worried sick. He'd rung home and got no reply. Then he'd left work straight away, broken his precious routine, come home, found the place empty, rang the police. I thought you might have been... He didn't finish, but went to the phone. Topher heard him telling someone that his son was home now, that everything was all right. Was it? When he returned, he looked as if he was trying to swallow something disgusting. That was the police. They said I shouldn't have panicked. Lots of boys your age sag off from school. Sag? Play truant. Say they're going to school and then go off and do something else. Stealing, usually. You don't think... I don't know what to think. I thought I could trust you, Topher. I went to the British Museum. Why? To look for Car. You're crazy. There didn't seem any point trying to explain. His dad hummed and hawed about whether to take him back to school. Decided it was too late. Said he ought to go back to work anyway and left, slamming the door. It was about 2:30. Topher went down the garden to the garden shed where he had first found Car. The newspapers on which she'd been sleeping had gone. More recent ones were stacked tidily at one side. Was it really nearly 2 months ago? He went out and searched the street again. Council workers were resurfacing the footpath opposite, pouring thick black tar over the old path where small yellow flowers had pushed their way through the tarmac. The road roller was standing by to flatten the new tar and the flowers underneath. It seemed typical somehow. Then Ellie appeared, at a run and arms waving. Her voice, when she started to speak, was all over the place. She didn't notice how fed up he was. They went inside. She thrust a leaflet into his hand. She'd been to the hospital and she could have it, she said. She pointed to the leaflet. It was about an operation on the ear, a cochlear implant. She read over his shoulder, pointing to bits she thought he should read. If it worked, the operation would help a lot. It would help her hear some sounds, her own voice for instance, so she would know how loud or soft it was and be able to control it more. She was very excited. That would be great, Ellie. Actually, the leaflet made him feel sick. All that stuff about cutting the head open and putting electrodes inside, wasn't it dangerous? She seemed to read his mind. It's worth a try, Topher. Go for it, Ellie. He sounded false, and her face was sort of flickering as it did when she was trying to put something difficult into words. Then she blurted it out. A series of blursts, really. Look, Topher, there are some things you can't change. You know that. I know that. And if... He finished her sentence for her, which usually made her mad. If you can't change them, you have to accept them. But if you can change them, you've got to try, haven't you? They could do the operation quite soon, she said. You'll come and see me in hospital, won't you? Sure. He hated hospitals, and he liked her the way she was. She touched his hand. I'll need your help. He made them both a cup of tea. Later she asked about Car, and he told her she still hadn't returned. But she will, Topher. He didn't say anything, and she looked annoyed and said, For someone called Hope, you haven't got much, have you? But she stayed till his dad came home. He was still in a bad mood and went on and on about Topher's crimes while he cooked the dinner. Monday shepherd's pie. But then suddenly, as he put the plates on the table, he said, Anyway, that's behind us now. Though you'll have to face the music at school tomorrow, but as long as you never do anything like that again, we'll forget it, right? Topher said okay. Later he asked his dad if he would write to school and explain that he'd been worried about Car and had gone to look for her. His dad said no, that it had been a stupid thing to do, and that if he wrote a letter like that, it would look as if he were condoning it, and he didn't. Topher went to bed early and longed for Car's return. His mum would have written a letter. He knew she would. Chapter 11. Car didn't return. At school next day, Miss Crab said, What got into you, Topher? Do you want to tell me all about it? And he thought he might. But when he mentioned Car, she said, Oh, that cat again. I'm not sure she's worth all the trouble she put you to. Cats don't care, Topher. Tell your dad to get you a dog. He didn't want a dog. He wanted Car, whether she cared or not. But she stayed away. His dad was away a lot too. He seemed to work longer hours and go out more at nights. Sylvia from the office was mentioned quite a lot. His dad brought her home once for a meal before they went out to play tennis. She was freckly with reddish-brown hair, and she laughed a lot, showing big horse teeth. She brought Topher a computer game. His dad said she was a whiz on computers. She got on Topher's nerves. They both did. It was July now, summer, but it didn't feel summery. Arbuton Road was leafy and noisy with children playing, and the ice cream van fanfaring, and the dogs barking at cats. They sat just out of reach on walls and window sills, but Car wasn't among them. Topher gave up looking for her as he trudged home from school, gave up expecting to see her on the porch or curled up on his duvet, gave up expecting the little stone cat to be anything other than stone. He put it back in the cupboard. Car had gone, and that was that. Then Ellie went too. One Thursday she wasn't in school. That evening her mum rang to say she had been called into hospital suddenly. There had been a cancellation, and she was next on the list for the operation. She would love to see you, Topher. Can we give you a lift sometime? Well, give us a ring when you want to. You've got our number, haven't you? She rang off. Now he loathed himself. Ellie wanted him, but he didn't have the guts to go and see her. Next day, during PE in the schoolyard, he thought he saw Car. She was in the garden of the house opposite the school. It was near the end of the lesson, and when everyone else went in, he hung back, then shot over the road. The cat wasn't there, nor was she next door. He went and searched the back gardens, and thought he saw her again, disappearing into a garden further up. Car! He climbed onto the fence, and a hand grabbed his ankle. Ah, it's you, is it? You're the one who's had my owls, are you? The man looked a bit like an owl himself, bald with thick glasses. Where are they, then? He pulled Topher off the fence. I don't know what you mean. Come on, tell me where they are and I'll let you off. The man had hold of his collar now. I don't know what you mean. Right, we're going over the road. The man jerked his head towards the school. You ought to be in there, I bet. Things were going from bad to worse. Minutes later they were standing in front of the headmaster, Mr. Westlake. It seemed that owls were two concrete ones, which used to stand on the gatepost of the man's house. They had disappeared 2 nights ago. I was at home 2 nights ago. How do I know that? The man was called Mr. Cleveland. You can ask my dad. Mr. Westlake was already picking up the phone. Good thinking, Topher. Get me Mr. Hope's work number, will you please, Valerie? He was speaking to the school secretary, but he turned to Mr. Cleveland. I think you can leave this in our hands now. Mr. Cleveland looked as if he was made of concrete. Really, Mr. Cleveland, I will be in touch with you. Reluctantly, the owl owner left the room, and Topher thought he'd go back to the classroom, but the head had other ideas. Just a minute, Topher. Sit down, lad. We still have a few things to talk about. What were you doing over the road for a start? Isn't this the second time you've been out of school during lesson time? Topher explained. Mr. Westlake looked grave. He looked even graver a few moments later after he'd answered the phone. Your father says he can't be sure where you were the night before last. He was out most of the evening. Topher didn't know why he bothered going home that afternoon, to a father who didn't trust him, who didn't stick up for him. Not that he was home when Topher let himself in, but he soon would be, and then there would be more trouble. When the doorbell rang, he hoped it was Ellie, then remembered where she was and felt worse. It was Lisa. She was off to Spain with her mum and dad, she said. Her dad was making a film, a western, a funny one. She started to tell him the plot, but it didn't seem very funny. He just wondered what it must be like to be going to Spain with your mum and dad. What about school? My mum will give me lessons, me and Michael. Michael was her little brother. Jodie's staying with a friend. Lucky old Lisa. When his dad came home, he put fish and chips on the table. Then he got plates and didn't say anything. It was worse than shouting. Topher couldn't eat anything. His dad put the unopened packet in the bin. Then he went into his study and disappeared behind a book. It was called A Brief History of Time. Later, Topher took him a cup of tea, thought he would try to talk to him. Aren't you going out to Dad tonight? His dad usually went to the pub on Fridays. I can't, can I? Why not? Because I can't trust you. Why not? But his dad didn't want to discuss anything, didn't want to hear his side of the story, didn't want to see him, it seemed. He just carried on reading. Topher went upstairs to his bedroom. For several minutes he stood at the window, watching a hawk hovering in the sky several blocks away. At least he thought it was a hawk, though it was unusual to see one in these parts. It hovered for quite a while, as if it were watching something below, but didn't swoop. When it flew away, Topher opened a book. He thought he might do some homework, but he changed his mind. What was the point? He was in trouble at school. Nobody noticed when he did anything good, only when he was bad. Or they thought he was bad. He hadn't stolen those owls, but nobody believed him. They all thought he was a thief. Suddenly he rushed downstairs, opened the study door, and yelled, Who do you think I am? Why can't you help me? His dad didn't reply, didn't even look at him, and he hadn't drunk the tea Topher had made him. Feeling like an insect, Topher crept back upstairs. Then he cried himself to sleep. But he woke up in the night. Something was tapping on the window. Chapter 12. It wasn't Car. He'd shot to the window, thinking it was, of course, there was something red, and he thought it was her open mouth. But it wasn't. Not Car. Not Car. That thought filled his mind as he pressed his face against the glass. Not Car. Then tap, tap. The glass vibrated against his nose, and slowly, as he strained to see, the redness in front of him took shape. There were claws outside. Claws, enormous red talons were gripping the window ledge on the other side of the glass, and red scaly legs stretched up from into the darkness. Tap, tap. Whatever it was impatient now. Topher looked up sharply and deciphered the shape of an enormous bird. A falcon, of course. But how big? Bigger than an eagle, bigger than he was, much bigger than he was. It towered above him. Tap! Its enormous beak crashed against the glass. Don't do that, you'll break it. I'll open it. How odd. But as he glanced down to take hold of the window and push it up, something even odder dawned on him, for he saw his own feet on the window-sill. Then Topher realised that the bird outside only seemed enormous because he, Topher, was tiny. How? When had it happened? Cur, or was it car? Come out, it seemed to say. Open up. Heaving up the window took all of his strength and left him with hardly enough energy to climb through the gap he had made. But he did, and found himself on the roof tiles, panting beneath the bird's hooked beak. Cur. Again the beak opened and closed. Get on my back. How? Topher shivered in his pyjamas as he peered up at the bird's grey breast. Cur. The bird jerked its head. To the back. Was that what it was saying? It seemed a better bet. So to the back he went, and there was the falcon's tail, just touching his roof. Its stiff feathers separated beneath his hands and feet as he climbed, forming a springy ladder. Then there he was at the top, and up went the falcon's tail like a seesaw, tipping him into the hollow of the bird's back, and he landed on his bum. Was this the hawk he had watched earlier, hovering over the Chertsey Street flats? It reminded him of something. Cur! With a cry, the bird swiveled its head to reveal a black and white eye. Of course! Horace the falcon, that's who it was. Topher held on as the majestic bird strode forward, rocking him gently from side to side. He held on, and all around him the lights of London glittered and flashed like a spectacular model of Legoland. Strings of light marked roads and railway lines, shining squares the windows of houses and hotels. He held on tight, his arms round the bird's neck as it strode to the edge of the roof and stopped. And in the distance the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral shone softly, and the post office tower winked. And even further away, a red light sparked rhythmically, off on, never stopping. It was a pylon, his dad had said, a radio aerial, which picked up signals from all over the universe. The universe! He felt he was at the centre. Beneath him the falcon stiffened, and looking down, Topher saw its red talons gripping the gutter, which was stuffed with old leaves. Further down he saw the garden path and the drain cover glimmering in the moonlight. He thought he saw a snail. Then, feeling dizzy, he looked up again. Now, inches from his own head, the falcon's was turning slowly like a radar detector. From left to right, then right to left, 180 degrees each time, it was taking bearings. Then, suddenly it stopped, seemed to have the information it needed. Then, knowing where it was going, it stared straight ahead, and again, Topher felt its body tense beneath him. And he tensed as he felt a rush of energy and a massive draft as the bird's wings rose and fell and rose again. Then the roof was no longer beneath them. But miraculously they were not falling, but flying, soaring up into the night sky. Ghosts like the night dressed on Mrs. Ewing's washing line danced for a second, then became a speck, as buildings, trees, roads and the winding River Thames all shrank beneath him. Lights grew smaller, then vanished, leaving only darkness below and silence. For hours the falcon was flying faster than the speed of light, and he, Topher, was on its back. Now the only lights he could see were above him, and he was heading for them. He, Topher, was heading for the stars. Whoosh, whoosh! All he could hear now was the beat of the bird's wings, propelling him forward through dimensions he couldn't name. Whoosh, whoosh! He was going to Car! He was sure about this, felt it in every part of him, and he was filled with joy.